These are the most shocking and interesting vintage photos and the most unusual objects from the past. Let's get 100,000 subscribers. In September 1896, two locomotives were deliberately crashed head-on in Crush, Texas, before a crowd of 40,000 spectators. The impact triggered simultaneous boiler explosions, sending iron and steel fragments flying through the air with deadly force. The Battle of the Wilderness in Virginia, fought in May 1864, left thousands dead in the dense forest as fires and chaos consumed the battlefield. Months later, human remains still lay scattered, grim evidence of the ferocity of the clash between Grant and Lee's armies. This is a traditional Chinese seal set, with small soapstone blocks stored in a decorated metal box. Each block would be carved on the base with a name, title, or emblem, then used with red ink to stamp documents or artwork. In 1912, 4-year-old Bobby Dunbar vanished during a family trip in Louisiana, triggering a huge search. A boy later found in Mississippi was taken by the Dunbars, though another woman claimed he was her son, Bruce Anderson. DNA testing in 2004 proved the boy was Bruce, and Bobby's true fate remains unknown. In 1964, segregationists in St. Augustine, Florida, attacked black protesters trying to enter a whites-only beach. The violence gained national attention and pressured Congress to act. Soon after, President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act, outlawing segregation in public spaces. In August 1864, Union prisoners at Andersonville Prison in Georgia received meager rations under horrific conditions. Built for 10,000 men, it held over 30,000, leading to mass starvation and disease. Nearly 13,000 died, marking it as one of the Civil War's deadliest camps. In 1906, Haj Mohammed Mesfewi of Marrakesh was found guilty of killing 36 women with an accomplice. He was sentenced to immurement, sealed alive inside a wall after weeks of public punishment. Crowds gathered until he died, making it one of Morocco's most notorious executions. This is the presidential box at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C., photographed in 1865. It was here on April 14, 1865, that President Abraham Lincoln was shot while watching a play. The site quickly became one of the most infamous locations in American history. This is the nose cone of an old artillery shell, likely from the late 19th or early 20th century. The engraved scale is a timed fuse used to set detonation. Its corroded base shows long exposure, marking it as historic ordnance. In 1917, only women and children remained on Clipperton Island after lighthouse keeper Victoriano Alvarez declared himself ruler. He was eventually killed by one of the women. Soon after, a U.S. ship rescued the survivors. This is a crystal radio detector from the early 1900s. A fine wire touched a galena crystal to pick up radio signals without electricity. It was one of the simplest and earliest radio receivers. In 1983, the moral majority published claims that AIDS was a homosexual disease threatening families. At the time, over 1,200 cases and 450 deaths had been reported in the U.S., but the government had not yet launched a coordinated response. In 1845, Sir John Franklin departed with 129 men on HMS Erebus and HMS Terror to explore the Northwest Passage. By 1848, both ships were trapped in ice, Franklin was dead, and most of the crew had perished. The wrecks were discovered in 2014 and 2016, but the exact cause of the disaster remains unknown. Around 1905, Oregon loggers harvested massive fir and redwood trees over 300 feet tall and 16 feet wide. The Pacific Northwest was a major timber supplier for national and international markets. Logging remained highly dangerous due to falling trees and heavy equipment. These are fire beaters, handmade with wooden handles and wire mesh. They are used to smother and extinguish small grass or brush fires. Such tools are common in wildfire-prone areas like the Scottish Highlands. In 1982, the SunPod was sold as a personal tanning capsule with a clear dome. It shielded users from wind, insects, and interruptions. The design was a brief novelty of 1980s leisure culture. In 1922, 6 people were killed at the Hinterkaifeck farm in Bavaria, including the Gruber family and their maid. Neighbors found the bodies after the family failed to appear at school and church. The murders remain unsolved. In the mid-20th century, sponge rubber balls were used to cover sharp car dashboard knobs. They were designed to reduce injuries to children during sudden stops. The balls were fixed in place with gasket shellac. This is an old wooden pencil case with a hinged lid. Such cases were commonly used by school children in the 19th and early 20th centuries. The compartments held pencils, pens, and small writing tools. On February 28, 1975, a train on the Northern City Line failed to stop at Moorgate Station in London and hit the tunnel end at 30 to 40 MEF. 43 people were killed and 74 injured, making it the deadliest accident in London Underground history. The driver applied no brakes, and the cause was never determined. In 1930, Scott Paper advertised its toilet tissues as safer alternatives to harsh products then on the market. The ad claimed doctors warned that poor quality paper could cause health problems, especially for women. On August 6, 1915, during the defense of Osowiec Fortress, German forces used chlorine and bromine gas against Russian troops. Lacking proper masks, the Russians advanced while coughing blood and suffering severe burns. Their counterattack became known as the Attack of the Dead Men, as shocked Germans fled before the gas-scarred soldiers. This is a Black & Decker Spotlighter, a rechargeable flashlight from the early 1980s. It was wall-mounted on a charging base so the light would always be ready for use. Such devices were common in offices and kitchens as emergency lighting. The mummified right hand of Saint Stephen, Hungary's first king, was found intact when his body was exhumed in 1083. Known as the Holy Right, it became a revered relic. Today it is preserved in St. Stephen's Basilica, Budapest. This is a Nelson lock used on shipping containers. The design hides the pin when locked, preventing cutting or tampering. It was commonly used for freight security. Julia Pastrana, born in Mexico in 1834, had hypertrichosis and was exhibited internationally as a performer. She died in 1860 after childbirth, and her embalmed body was displayed for over a century. In 2013, she was finally returned to Mexico for burial. This 1862 image shows a Civil War field ambulance at Antietam, Maryland. Horse-drawn wagons carried wounded soldiers from the battlefield to makeshift hospitals. The Battle of Antietam was the bloodiest single day in American history, with over 22,000 casualties. This 19th century photograph shows a doctor with surgical instruments and medicine vials. Portable medical kits like these were used for home visits. In 1932, Australia launched the Emu War after emus damaged wheat crops in Western Australia. Soldiers armed with machine guns killed fewer than 1,000 birds out of tens of thousands. The campaign failed, and the government later adopted a bounty system instead. In the 1960s, neuroscientist John Lilly ran a NASA-funded experiment to teach dolphins human language. Researcher Margaret Lovett lived with a dolphin named Peter for constant interaction. The project ended when funding stopped, and Peter died soon after being moved to another facility. In 1912, Theodore Roosevelt was shot in the chest while campaigning in Milwaukee. A folded 50-page speech in his glasses case slowed the bullet, preventing fatal injury. He refused medical attention and delivered a 90-minute speech before seeking treatment. In ancient Pompeii, phallic carvings were commonly placed on walls, streets, and doorways. They were believed to protect against the evil eye, a force thought to bring misfortune. While sometimes linked to brothels, most scholars view them as protective symbols. Herbert Cochran, a 23-year-old tailor from Fairmont, Nebraska, was arrested for burglary on November 24, 1899. His police record noted blue eyes, blonde hair, a stooped build, and eyebrows meeting at the bridge of his nose. His mugshot unusually shows an officer holding him in a headlock. The last known photo of Ernesto Che Guevara shows him studying a map in Bolivia in 1967, weeks before he was captured and killed by the Bolivian army with CIA assistance. This object is an Orion boilerplate capsule used by NASA for training and testing. These low-fidelity mock-ups are built to match the size and shape of real spacecraft and are used to simulate splashdowns, practice recovery operations, and study structural forces during landing. This is the last known photo of comedian Harry Einstein, taken at a Friars Club dinner in Los Angeles in 1958. He was speaking with Milton Berle when he suddenly collapsed from a heart attack and passed away shortly after. The last known photo aboard the Titanic, taken April 1912, shows Second Officer Charles Lytler, who survived, and First Officer William Murdoch, who did not, shortly before the ship struck an iceberg. A historic image of Fenway Park in Boston, showing players on the field and stands filled with spectators. Opened in 1912, Fenway is the oldest Major League Baseball stadium still in use. The advertisement on the outfield wall promotes the Boston Herald, a major local newspaper of the era. In 1933, Adolf Hitler rose to power as Chancellor of Germany, marking the beginning of Nazi rule. That same year, the United States ended prohibition with the ratification of the 21st Amendment, repealing the nationwide alcohol ban. 2 wounded soldiers lie in hospital beds in Nashville during the 1860s, receiving care from a nurse. Crutches and medical supplies can be seen nearby, reflecting the improvised conditions of Civil War field hospitals. In 1933, prohibition ended in the United States after 13 years of nationwide alcohol ban. The Cullen-Harrison Act allowed the production and sale of beer with up to 3.2% alcohol. Crowds gathered to cheer as breweries resumed legal deliveries. Charlie Chaplin on a film set in the 1910s, wearing his iconic costume and standing with Stan Laurel and cameraman Roland Totherow. The group worked together during Chaplin's early career in silent cinema. Totherow would remain Chaplin's chief cinematographer for more than 30 years. The Scold's bridle, also called the brank, was an iron punishment device used in Europe from the 16th to 19th centuries. It was placed on women accused of gossiping or speaking out of turn. A metal bit or tongue piece pressed down to prevent speech, while chains allowed the wearer to be paraded in public as humiliation. A brass band performs on roller skates at the Dun Firm Line skating rink in Scotland around 1900. Such rink bands were a feature of the early roller skating craze in Europe, providing live music while skaters circled the floor. In August 1972, Robert Rines, Martin Klein, and Tim Dinsdale conducted a Loch Ness investigation using a 16mm time-lapse camera and 50W strobe light, set 13 meters underwater to take photos every 45 seconds. In 1966, Mad Magazine published an outtake that is now recognized as containing racist imagery. The piece reflected stereotypes common in mid-20th century American media, which today are widely condemned. This photo from the 1990s shows Kim Jong-un as a child wearing a military-style uniform. He is seated at a desk, writing on paper, while an adult woman stands next to him observing. This is a 1950s advertisement for Chase and Sanborn coffee. It shows a woman depicted over a man's lap with the text warning wives about buying stale coffee. The ad promoted the brand's pressure-packed cans as a guarantee of freshness. Early Crayola crayon boxes, produced by Binney & Smith Co-wares of New York, featured simple gold and green packaging. The number 6 box contained 6 colors, and the number 8 box contained 8. These designs date back to the early 1900s, before Crayola adopted its modern bright yellow packaging. The Beatles' final public performance took place on January 30th, 1969, on the rooftop of Apple Corps headquarters in London. John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr played an unannounced set that lasted 42 minutes before police shut it down due to noise complaints. Chicago newspaper headlines from 1918 document the influenza pandemic. Measures included raids on saloons, mandatory open church windows, curfews, and arrests for uncovered sneezes. Drafted men were prioritized for inoculation, and non-essential gatherings were banned to slow the spread. This structure is a reservoir draw-off tower used to control water levels in small dams. The vertical openings allow water to exit at different heights, while the cage prevents debris from entering. Such towers were commonly built in flood-prone regions to regulate flow. This WB map traces the route of the U.S. 20th Armored Division from France through Belgium and Germany into Austria in 1945. The timetable shows their advance from March to May, ending with the capture of Munich. American soldiers march along a rural path during the Korean War in 1950, while civilians carrying belongings move in the opposite direction amid the conflict. This photograph shows Marilyn Monroe with singer Buddy Greco in 1962, shortly before her death at age 36. The image was taken during a gathering in California, also attended by Frank Sinatra. It is recognized as the final known photo of Monroe, captured just days before August 4, 1962. Dr. Bethania Owens Adair, 1831-1926, was one of the first female physicians in Oregon. After graduating in Michigan in the 1870s, she practiced in the Pacific Northwest, often traveling through difficult conditions to reach patients. The U.S. Capitol Dome, under construction in 1857. Workers built the cast iron structure to replace the original wooden dome, completing it during the Civil War in 1866. John Glenn, future astronaut and U.S. Senator, flew around 150 combat missions in the Korean War. In 1952, baseball star Ted Williams served in the same squadron and completed nearly 40 missions, many as Glenn's wingman. Former Confederate and Union soldiers shake hands during the 50th anniversary reunion of the Battle of Gettysburg in 1913. Symbolizing reconciliation after the Civil War. In the 1920s, Harry Houdini exposed fake spirit photographs. This image shows him with a book beside a fabricated ghostly figure of Abraham Lincoln, created through double exposure to deceive people. Mark Twain, photographed in 1910, shortly before his death at age 74. Known for works like Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, he remains one of America's most influential writers. Adolf Hitler in Berlin, April 1945, standing outside his bomb-damaged Führer bunker during the final days of World War II. This is one of the last known photographs of him before his death. Inuit woman ice fishing in Alaska, 1906, using wooden poles beside a freshly cut ice hole with a pile of caught fish at her feet. This is a wooden fish keep, designed to be anchored in a stream with chains. The hollow slatted structure allowed water to flow through and keep freshly caught fish alive until retrieval. African American teamsters near a signal tower at Bermuda Hundred, Virginia, 1864. Many formerly enslaved men worked for the Union Army in logistics, transporting supplies and equipment during the Civil War. Excavation of an Assyrian relief depicting a lamassu at Dur Sharakin, modern Khorsabad, Iraq, late 19th to early 20th century. These protective deities, combining human, animal, and divine features, once guarded the entrances of Assyrian palaces. Members of the Kalandia Camp Women's Handicraft Cooperative Society Board of Directors, pictured during an event at Kalandia Refugee Camp, Palestine, 1950s. Palestinian farmer plowing land with a camel near Jerusalem, 1950s. Camels were used as draft animals in agriculture across the region during this period. Gymnastics class in 1952, where a student leaps over 6 classmates lined up in formation. Such coordinated stunts were a hallmark of mid-20th century physical education displays. Oda Benga, a Mbuti man from the Congo Free State, was brought to the United States in 1904 for display at the St. Louis World's Fair and later exhibited at the Bronx Zoo. Born in 1885, his exploitation reflected the racist practices of the era. In November 1966, New York City was covered by a toxic smog caused by stagnant air that lasted 3 days. The severe air pollution event resulted in the deaths of 168 people and highlighted the dangers of unchecked industrial emissions. Dorothea Lange photographed this air pump with a hand-painted sign in the 1930s. The sign reads, "This is your country, don't let the big men take it away from you." Lange frequently documented hand-painted signs as part of her work during the Great Depression. Donald Sutherland in New York, 1970. The Canadian actor posed with one side of his face clean-shaven and the other with long hair and beard. A Sailor Dressed in Drag, 1906. The man, identified as able seaman Arthur Roach of HMS Prince of Wales, posed as a milkmaid for a comedic photograph. A Thermador car cooler from the 1930s, 1950s, often called a swamp cooler. It was a cylindrical evaporative cooling device mounted on a car window. Air passing through water-soaked material inside produced a cooling effect for passengers before modern air conditioning existed. A 1928 Spanish illustration envisions giant flying ocean liners with decks, cabins, and leisure areas. Titled Los Transatlánticos Aéreos del Porvenir, it reflects early optimism about aviation's future. Buku Hamburger, stand in Harlingen, Texas, photographed by Russell Lee in February 1939. The menu advertised hamburgers for 5 cents, chili for 10 cents, and breakfast for 25 cents, with 7-Up sold on site. A 1950s housing ad shows homes priced between $7,150 and $7,900, with monthly payments under $50. The offer included 2 2 or 3 bedrooms, 1 bath, a screened porch, and in some cases, a carport. Costs covered principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. Before Yuri Gagarin's flight in 1961, the Soviet Union conducted space experiments with animals. Dogs such as Laika are the most documented, but piglets were also reportedly tested. In 1895, workers at the Bureau of Engraving and Printing in Washington, D.C., prepared postage stamps in the gumming and drying room. The process involved applying adhesive to sheets of stamps before cutting and distribution. In 1915, Standard Oil workers in Bayonne, New Jersey, clashed with police during a strike. Strikers threw bricks in violent confrontations. The unrest highlighted harsh labor conditions in the oil industry. A 1,500-year-old pair of Byzantine sandals was discovered in Istanbul during excavations for the Marmaray Rail project. The sandals feature Greek inscriptions and decorative carvings. The inscription reads, "Use in health, lady, wear in beauty and happiness." In 2014, archaeologists found a wooden ski on Deigervarden Mountain in Norway. A second ski was uncovered in 2021, buried deeper in the ice. The pair, over 1,300 years old, shows evidence of handmade construction, wear, and repair. A riveting crew works on the Cedar River Pipeline in 1899. The project laid pipe to supply water to Seattle, Washington. This system became a key part of the city's early water infrastructure. The Great Leap Forward, 1958-1962, launched by Mao Zedong, aimed to boost China's industry and agriculture. Unrealistic grain quotas caused widespread starvation. The resulting famine killed tens of millions. An obsidian blade was uncovered in Northern California after an earthquake by the Wilder brothers. It was identified as a ceremonial object of the Karuk people. Similar blades are reported to still be in use by the tribe. Snow rollers were used in the United States about a century ago to pack down fresh snow on rural roads. Horse-drawn rollers created smooth, compact surfaces that allowed sleighs to travel during winter. This method kept roads passable before modern snowplows. In 1947, Thor Heyerdahl sailed the Kon-Tiki, a raft of balsa logs and hemp rope, 4,300 miles from Peru to French Polynesia. The voyage showed that ancient peoples could have crossed the Pacific. In the early 1900s, a Jeerbal man in Ravenshoe, Queensland, demonstrated tree climbing with a lawyer cane rope. Captured by Eric Mueberg, the photo highlights traditional rainforest skills of the Jeerbal people. On December 25, 2016, a 2-ton RAF bomb from World War II was discovered in Augsburg, Germany, forcing 54,000 people to evacuate. Experts defused it safely, preventing destruction across the city. Unexploded ordnance from the war is still regularly found in Europe. In early canal tunnels without towpaths, boats were moved by legging. Men lay on planks and pushed against the tunnel walls with their legs to propel the vessel. This method was common before motorized boats. Ordnance personnel repair an anti-aircraft gun on Guadalcanal during World War II. Working near Henderson Field under constant threat, they kept weapons operational with limited resources. Two widows stand together during the funeral of Martin Luther King Jr. in April 1968. The event in Atlanta drew national attention as thousands gathered to honor the civil rights leader. Early 20th century welding goggles designed to shield eyes from sparks and intense light, with perforations to reduce glare while allowing limited vision. A 1950s sweater advertisement depicted two male climbers mocking women as a drag on mountains, reflecting the casual sexism common in mid-20th century advertising. A collection of 19th and early 20th century surgical bone saws, used by doctors for amputations and other operations, before modern surgical tools and anesthesia were widely available. The skull kept in the Basilica of Saint-Maximin-la-Sainte-Baume in France is venerated as the relic of Mary Magdalene. It has been displayed there since the 13th century inside a golden reliquary bust. This artifact remains one of the most controversial relics in Christian history. These 17th century wooden anatomical models were used to teach medicine without dissection. The figures feature removable panels revealing carved organs inside. They reflect the era's blend of science, superstition, and artistry in understanding the human body. In 1923, Nazi SA men marched in Braunschweig, Germany, carrying a skull flag as a symbol of intimidation. The SA, or Sturmabteilung, acted as the paramilitary wing of the Nazi Party. Their violent displays of power marked the rise of fascist movements in post-World War I Germany. In 1925, a convicted murderer was photographed moments before execution in the electric chair in the United States. The device had been introduced in 1890 as a modern method of capital punishment. It became one of the most controversial symbols of American justice in the 20th century. Somali soldier photographed in 1943, wearing a British colonial uniform during World War II. At the time, many Somali men served in the British forces across East Africa. In 1951, a man dressed as the Easter Bunny visited patients in a U.S. hospital. Such visits were organized to boost morale and bring cheer to those in recovery. Chicago Slaughterhouse, 1906. Workers used sledgehammers to kill cattle before processing. This brutal method was common until mechanical stunning devices replaced it. The scene became infamous after Upton Sinclair's exposé. The jungle revealed slaughterhouse conditions. Promotional still from the Japanese silent film A Page of Madness, 1926. The avant-garde movie, directed by Teinosuke Kinugasa, was set in a mental asylum and became a landmark of experimental cinema. It was long thought lost until the director rediscovered a copy in the 1970s. A Street Dentist in China, 1920. Dental care was often performed by unlicensed practitioners using rudimentary tools in public markets. Such extractions were quick, cheap, and done without anesthesia. Peter Chemy, Germany, 1947. After surviving a concentration camp, he was taken in by a German family who offered him food and shelter. Instead of gratitude, he killed all three with a hatchet, then faced execution for the murders. Russian soldiers in 1916 staged a performance during World War I, wearing improvised masks and costumes. Such theatrical shows were organized to boost morale at the front. Three former Confederate soldiers posed together in Tennessee in 1920. Identified as Buchanan, W.L. Drake, and Lewis Nelson, they were among the last living veterans of the Civil War. Such reunions were held decades after the conflict as survivors aged into their final years. A Soviet couple set up a picnic in Russia in 1964, captured by Life magazine. The photo, linked to the Soviet hippie movement, shows bottles, food, and an improvised display nailed to a tree. Its odd details, like the hot dog figure, made it a striking glimpse into everyday Soviet youth culture. Johnny and Robert Eck photographed in the U.S. in 1922. Johnny, born with a rare congenital condition, lived without the lower half of his torso. Despite this, he became known as the Half Boy, and later performed in sideshows and films. Edith Burchett, wife of tattoo pioneer George Burchett, photographed in England in 1921. She was extensively tattooed by her husband, known as the King of Tattooists. Their work helped popularize body art in early 20th century Europe. A Central African woman photographed in 1955 with an elongated skull, the result of traditional cranial modification. This cultural practice was used in some regions as a marker of beauty, status, or identity. Doris Smith rides the wall of death without hands or safety gear at a fair in Essex, England, 1938. The wooden cylinder allowed riders to defy gravity using speed and centrifugal force. Such stunts were a popular but extremely dangerous attraction of the time. A sword swallower performing in Weihai Wei, China, 1922. The act drew both fear and fascination from onlookers. A man trims the nails of a chained lion in London, 1935. The practice highlighted human dominance over wild animals. It also reflected the dangers of early captive animal handling. Buffins the cat was photographed in Washington, 1958. He won the National Cat Club Award for Most Attractive Expression. The unusual look made him a minor sensation of the contest. The Carter family of Toronto, Ontario, was photographed in 1936. Louise and John William Carter, immigrants from Barbados, raised 9 children within a decade. Their portrait reflects the life of Black immigrant families in early 20th century Canada. Smoke billows over the River Thames during the Blitz in London, 1940. German bombing raids targeted the city's docks and industrial areas. The Tower Bridge stands intact as destruction spreads nearby. Benigno Ninoy Aquino Jr., future Philippine senator, returned from the Korean War in the 1950s. He staged a fake mouth wound to trick reporters. The bizarre act sparked outrage and lasting controversy. Mahatma Gandhi served as a stretcher bearer during the Second Boer War in South Africa, 1899-1900. He organized an Indian ambulance corps of 1,100 volunteers. This early role shaped his path toward nonviolent resistance. George S. Patton competed in fencing at the 1912 Stockholm Olympics as part of the first modern pentathlon. He finished 5th overall, years before becoming a U.S. Army general in World War II. Few remember him as an Olympic athlete. During World War I and II, pigeons were equipped with tiny automatic cameras to capture aerial reconnaissance photos. The devices were lightweight enough for flight, but produced valuable intelligence images. This unusual method bridged the gap before drones and advanced aircraft. In 1943, Fidel Castro studied at Colegio de Belén, a prestigious Jesuit school in Havana. He is pictured here in a classroom, years before rising to power in Cuba. This rare photo shows him as a student, not yet the revolutionary figure he would become. Lazarus and Joannes Baptista Colloredo were Italian conjoined twins who toured Europe in the 17th century. Lazarus lived a relatively normal life, while Joannes's undeveloped body protruded from him. 2 girls play a giant bluebird harmonica in a music store on Regent Street, London. The photo was taken in 1938. This was one of the largest commercially produced harmonicas of its time. Walt Disney reviews a scale model of Disneyland with his team in 1954. The project combined influences from world fairs, history museums, and amusement parks. Disneyland officially opened in Anaheim, California on July 17, 1955. Ramon Magsaysay, then Defense Secretary of the Philippines, drops a smoke bomb from a spotter plane. The action was part of operations against the Hukbalahap insurgency in the early 1950s. Magsaysay later became the 7th president of the Philippines in 1953. Alfred Hitchcock began directing his first film, Number 13 in London, in 1922. The production ran out of funding before completion, leaving it unfinished. It remains a lost project, marking Hitchcock's earliest attempt at filmmaking. In 1944, Princess Elizabeth visited an American air base in England during World War II. She met U.S. airmen standing beside a B-17 bomber named Rose of York. This event highlighted her early public role before becoming Queen Elizabeth II. Neil Armstrong served as a U.S. Navy pilot during the Korean War in 1951-52. He flew the Grumman F-9F-2 Panther on combat missions against North Korean targets. This experience came years before he became the first man to walk on the moon in 1969. These are elite Egyptian women, traditionally confined to harems, marching in public during the 1919 revolution. Veiled ladies took to the streets in unprecedented protest against British rule in March 1919. Their actions marked a turning point when harem norms gave way to political activism. Madame Gustica, billed from the Duck-Bill tribe, performed in New York on April 12, 1930. Her lips were stretched up to 20 cm using progressively larger discs, and she smoked a pipe in the act. She likely came from Ethiopia, though specifics of her origin remain obscure. This rare photograph shows Albert Einstein at a lecture in Pittsburgh in 1934. On the chalkboard, he wrote an early version of his mass-energy equation, which later became known worldwide as E equals mc squared. Adolf Hitler is shown posing with fellow soldiers of the Bavarian Reserve Infantry Regiment No. 16 during World War I. At that time, he served as a message runner, Gefreiter, on the Western Front. This image captures his earliest known military role decades before he rose to power. U.S. Marines wade through surf after leaving a landing ship tank during the Cape Gloucester landings, December 1943. The battle on New Britain lasted until January 1944, with American and Australian forces fighting Japanese defenders. The operation secured vital airfields for the Allied advance in the Pacific. Ethel Granger became known in 1959 for having the smallest recorded waist in history at just 13 inches. Her husband, William Granger, enforced constant corset wearing to achieve the extreme figure. She also received multiple piercings from him, making her one of the earliest documented women in Britain with facial piercings. Joseph Goebbels, aged around 19, is pictured with classmates during his school years in 1916. He called a speech at his graduation ceremony in 1917 and graduated with top marks before pursuing university studies in literature and philology. This image captures an early phase of the future Nazi propaganda minister, long before his rise to power. Shirtless Hungarian men wearing gas masks during a training drill around 1935. They practice carrying out intense tasks while breathing through masks to acclimate to chemical warfare gear. In 1930, a Chinese man named Wang was photographed in Manchuria with a 13-inch horn-like growth on his head. Ripley's Believe It or Not tried for years to recruit him for exhibitions, but he refused. The single photo taken by a banker is the only known record of his existence. Sumo wrestlers in Japan, 1905. The photo shows athletes during the Meiji era when the sport was gaining national recognition. It is among the earliest preserved images of professional sumo. In the 1950s, British Boy Scouts held an annual Bob a Job Week to raise funds. Scouts performed small tasks like shining shoes in exchange for a shilling. The event became a nationwide tradition before ending in the 1990s. Moscow, May 9, 1945. The Soviet Union celebrated Victory Day one day after the Western Allies. The date marked Germany's official surrender on the Eastern Front. Crowds filled the capital as the war in Europe came to an end. German artists around 1900 created postcards imagining life in the year 2000. This series depicted people with personal wings for flight as part of a utopian future. Such illustrations reflected early visions of human technological progress. Models posed with a lineup of General Motors cars in Michigan, 1956. Post-war America saw automobiles become symbols of status and suburban life. A young Frank Sinatra receives an autograph from baseball legend Lou Gehrig in 1939 during the World Series. Sinatra was around 23 and Gehrig would retire shortly after due to illness. Balinese girl learning to use a film camera, 1934. The photo was taken during the Dutch colonial period. It shows early exposure of Bali to modern photography and cinema. Entrance of Frank Sinatra's home and Beaumont Drive, 1960s. The property was located in Los Angeles. It served as one of Sinatra's main residences during that decade. Marilyn Monroe attended the Broadway premiere of Tennessee Williams's Cat on a Hot Tin Roof at the Morosco Theater in New York on March 24, 1955, where she was photographed by Ed Feingersch while preparing at the Ambassador Hotel. This was the debut of the play, years before the 1958 film version appeared without her involvement. Ronald McDonald, introduced in 1963, is shown here in a 1970s promotional photograph. The early costume's oversized features preceded the standardized McDonald Land redesign, launched in 1971. The role was originated by broadcaster Willard Scott. In 1997, IBM's supercomputer Deep Blue defeated world chess champion Garry Kasparov in a 6-game match. It was the first time a reigning champion lost to a computer under standard tournament conditions. The event marked a milestone in artificial intelligence history. On April 18, 1906, a powerful earthquake struck San Francisco. Subsequent fires destroyed more than 80% of the city and caused most of the damage. Around 3,000 people died, making it one of the deadliest disasters in U.S. history. Mount St. Helens erupted in Washington on May 18, 1980, in the deadliest volcanic event in U.S. history. The explosion destroyed the summit and created a massive horseshoe-shaped crater. Entire domes, including goat rocks, were obliterated in the blast. Neil Armstrong celebrated his 39th birthday in 1969 at NASA's Lunar Receiving Laboratory in Houston after returning from Apollo 11. Apollo 11 marked the first successful moon landing, making Armstrong and his crew national heroes. The mission was also a Cold War demonstration of U.S. technological power. Amelia Earhart became the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic in 1932. She set multiple aviation records and also wrote best-selling books about her flights. In 1937, she vanished with navigator Fred Noonan during an attempted round-the-world journey. Women's League roller derby drew large crowds in New York during the 1950s. The sport gave female athletes a rare stage in an era of limited opportunities. Roller derby became both entertainment and a breakthrough for women in professional sports. Joseph Stalin, at about age 15, in a class photo from the Gori Religious School taken around 1893. This image is among the earliest known photographs of Stalin, emerging decades before his ascent to the Soviet leadership. The photo offers a rare glimpse into the childhood of the future dictator. Junction of Queens Road, Central and Cochrane Street, Hong Kong, circa 1895. Taken by photographer William Henry Jackson, the image shows colonial-era street life at one of the city's oldest intersections. It captures early urban development in Central before major land reclamation reshaped Hong Kong's shoreline. In late 1922, Buster Keaton and his wife, Natalie Talmadge, were photographed at a Chicago train station with their infant son, Joseph, born that June. The image, taken by a Chicago Daily News photographer, is one of the earliest known family portraits of the silent film star. Joseph, later nicknamed Buster Keaton Jr., was the couple's first child. In 1913, French motorcycle champion André Grapperon was photographed riding a 1912 Indian board track V-twin. Board track racing was one of the most dangerous sports of the era, with riders reaching high speeds on steep wooden tracks. These races often ended in deadly crashes, earning the tracks the nickname Murderdromes. On November 1, 1964, engineers at Cape Canaveral conducted weight and balance tests on the Saturn YS-4 second stage for the SA-9 mission. This stage was powered by 6 RL-10 engines, burning liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen. The SA-9 flight successfully launched an Apollo boilerplate spacecraft into orbit, paving the way for future Apollo missions. In 1969, astronaut David Scott performed an EVA from the Apollo 9 command module, Gumdrop. This was the first test of the complete Apollo spacecraft in Earth orbit. The mission validated docking, life support, and mobility systems crucial for the moon landing. In 1875, a Japanese man was photographed with a full-body irizumi tattoo. Traditional irizumi was created using hand-poke techniques with wooden handles and metal needles. These tattoos often depicted legendary heroes, mythical creatures, and protective symbols. In 1955, this photo captured Interstate 75 running through downtown Atlanta. The highway was part of the rapidly expanding U.S. interstate system of the 1950s. It symbolized the post-war boom in car ownership and suburban growth. An aerial view of London in 1945 shows vast destruction from the Blitz during World War II. Entire blocks of residential housing were reduced to rubble, leaving only shells of buildings. The photo captures the scale of devastation the city endured before reconstruction began. An ornate English toothpick made in 1620, featuring a gold hook and a decorated handle. It reflects how even simple personal items were crafted with luxury and artistry. A portable voodoo altar containing small ritual figures and offerings, crafted for practitioners to carry their worship with them. Such objects allowed rituals to be performed outside of permanent shrines. These traveling altars reflect the adaptability and persistence of spiritual traditions. A 7-Up advertisement from 1960 uses bowling as a playful theme to market the drink as a quick source of energy. The slogan, "It's yours with this quick, fresh lift," promotes the soda as refreshing and revitalizing. Vintage ads like this often mixed humor with exaggerated claims to appeal to young consumers. In Victorian times, miniature butcher shops like this one were popular alternatives to doll houses. These playsets featured tiny carcasses, sausages, and wooden butchers, complete with sawdust-covered floors. They were intended to teach children about food and commerce, much like modern supermarket playsets. John Lennon in India in 1968, tilting his guitar while searching for a lost pick during the Beatles' visit to study transcendental meditation with Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. Leonhard Seppala with his sled team led by Togo, far left, during the 1925 serum run to Nome, Alaska, where dog teams delivered diphtheria antitoxin to stop the outbreak. Under excavation on Easter Island in the 20th century, researchers revealed that the famous Moai statues are not just heads, but also have buried torsos. The bodies extend several meters underground, carved with detailed symbols and inscriptions. This discovery proved that the statues were far larger and more complex than previously thought. In 1966, Martin Luther King Jr. was photographed making a trick shot at a pool table while surrounded by onlookers. Known primarily for his leadership in the civil rights movement, King also enjoyed playing billiards during his downtime. This rare image shows a lighter side of his life outside activism. This photograph shows Times Square in New York City on August 14th, 1945, during celebrations of Japan's surrender that ended World War II. The announcement triggered massive crowds filling the streets in what became known as VJ Day, Victory over Japan Day. It remains one of the most iconic public gatherings in American history. This photograph of Marilyn Monroe was taken by George Barris in June 1962, just weeks before her death. It shows her smiling and holding a glass during what became her final photo shoot. Monroe died on August 4th, 1962, at the age of 36. Friends, write your opinion in the comments and subscribe to my second channel. There are the same cool videos. The link is in the description.